Vuyile stood here. He said Molweni and there was no response. I just want to repeat what he said. Molweni. Thank you very much. Folks, the 6th of March 1963 was a wacky Wednesday. At the rise of dawn, ngomsobomvu in isiXhosa, I made a journey from a place that for 9 months has been a warm, peaceful space, a safe haven for me. I arrived in a new home where people were different, a place I've never been before, and the people spoke differently. I was tiny, everybody was big. People spoke, and I cried. The space I arrived at, which I loved, it was going to be my new home. It was cold and smoky. I understood why it was cold. Because for almost 3 months in 1963, between January and March, it had been raining, start and stop. So the space I found myself, and that was going to be my home that day, if you looked around the walls, you would see the water was just beginning to pass through the mud walls of our hut. I understood why it was smoky. It was smoky because my mom was using wet firewood to cook and to keep the space in which we found ourselves warm. Now, I want to introduce myself. Kabona, myself. My name is Mpumelelo Ncwadi. Put that together, it means success through learning. My parents were farm laborers. They were never paid with money. They were paid with something called umxhesho. Umxhesho is food ration. So every Monday, my mother went and stood, in front of the farmer's house, and was given umxhesho. Right in front of our house, we had a windmill, and the windmill had a concrete tank. That windmill pumped water into that concrete tank. But my family was never allowed to get water from that concrete tank because that concrete tank was for the cattle. So my mother walked 3 kilometers to the fish river and kneeled down every day and dropped a bucket with a rope to pick up the dirty water. That's the water we drank. There was no school 15 kilometers from the place where I was born. But something strange happened. One day a priest came to the farm, talked to my mother, and said, these kids have got to go to school. So me as a 7-year-old, and my sister as a 10-year-old. My sister's name is Nontsikelelo, by the way. Nontsikelelo was born in 1960, 3 years before me. When I came into the world, finally my mother was going to give me the name Mpumelelo, which had been waiting for me for 3 years, because in 1960, my mother didn't have a way of knowing what the gender of her first child was going to be. So she said, if it's a girl, it's Nontsikelelo. If it's a boy, it's Mpumelelo. So I got my name 3 years later, but they had been waiting for me. So when the priest spoke to my mother and said, these kids have got to school, they've got to go to school, that meant my parents had to make a plan. So when my sister was 10 and I was 7, we were walking 15 kilometers one way every morning for 2 years to our nearest school. Now, what really, when we looked at our lives, when we were growing up, we knew for us to be resilient, we had to find a way that would be a coping mechanism. So that coping mechanism became something called iLima. iLima comes from ukulima, which means to plant. And think of it this way, in the simplest way. It's a coming together of villagers to put together the resources, the knowledge, the wisdom, in order for them to cope and become resilient as a collective. So my mother participated every year on this thing called iLima. I remember my mother had a coop full of chicken when we went to iLima. We came back with seeds for all sorts of types of crops which we planted, and those crops made sure that we had food. But we were able to sell our surplus, to people around us. And that, ladies and gentlemen, funded my education. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to leave it to you to go to the internet and actually find out a little bit about myself. But I'm going to tell you one thing. If it was not for iLima, which is all about sharing, I would have never been a Nelson Mandela Scholar at Cambridge, where I did my master's. One day, at the Constitutional Hill in Johannesburg, the then chairman of Unilever, a man called Neil Fitzgerald, was handing me this award, and he said to me, "What do you want to do with the knowledge that you gained?" No brainer. I didn't even need to think about it. I said, I want to use the knowledge to help those who are less fortunate than myself. And that's what I do. One place where I'm doing that as we speak is a place called Lelyfontein. It's up on the Northern Cape. If you come out of this room, you join the N1 and you exit on the N7, you'll pass a town, Malmesbury, you'll pass Mauriceburg, you'll pass Piketberg, you'll go to Citrusdal, you'll go to Clanwilliam, you'll go to Klaver, Van Reinsdorp, Nieuweres, Pieterfontein, and you travel and you arrive at a little town called Garis, 467 kilometers from here. If you pass Garis by only 49 kilometers, you'll see a signpost on the left-hand side of the road that says, "Welcome to Gamiskron." Pass the board, turn right into Gamiskron and turn left. Follow the gravel road from the floor of the Gamisberg mountain. And 40 kilometers on top of the Gamisberg, the road makes a Y. On that Y, you'll see there's a board, but the arrow is facing down. Turn left, because the board is supposed to be 10. Turn left, go for 1 kilometer. In fact, go for half a kilometer, then you'll see a huge boulder. The boulder is rated Lelyfontein. Pass the boulder, and you arrive in a small town, in a small village called Lelyfontein with a church. Lelyfontein was named after a fontaine with lilies around it. Lelyfontein, where's the fountain? The fountain is behind the church. When the missionaries arrived in Lelyfontein, the Methodist missionary, they went and built a church. That was 1802. They started building the church, and behind the church they planted poplar trees around this spring that was standing there. Strangely, for hundreds of years, the Nama people brought their sheep to this fountain to drink that the missionaries planted trees around. Now, when I say to you Namakwaland, what do you think of? You think of flowers. You don't think of the Nama people. So when the missionaries came, they planted the poplar trees. The poplar trees grew into becoming a forest. And when they grew into becoming a forest, the lilies disappeared. The poplar trees were taking 900 liters of water every day. So in 2009, an impact investment of about 140,000 came from Conservation International to restore that fountain. That fountain was restored. A week after the fountain was finished, the people finished restoring the fountain, the pump that from the municipality that pumped water for that village of 1,000 people, 224 households, broke down. And that fountain, for almost a month, provided those people and their sheep with water. Now, this is a beautiful story, but there's something in this story that is missing. The people who asked me to go to the Northern Cape, they said to me, "We want you to destock Namakwale." Because people think flowers, they don't think farmers. So they wanted me to destock Namakwale. Basically, what they wanted me to do is to go to Namakwale and reduce the number of sheep that those Nama farmers have got to the right number so that you can protect the biodiversity of Namakwale. So everybody thinks about the flowers. Nobody thinks about the farmers. Where are those farmers supposed to take their sheep? They're supposed to give their sheep to speculators. If you went to Namakwale right now as we speak, there's speculators everywhere. You buy the best meat, best lamb in this nation from people at as little as 600 rands. Little as 600 rand, and you transport these animals for almost 1,600 to KZN. and you sell the very same animal that you got from these people, you sell it, for about 2,000 rands. Now, what that does, it robs the people of Namakwaland, the Nama farmers who, like my parents, are uneducated. It robs them of a little thing, ladies and gentlemen. It robs them of an income that they can use to to take their children to school. It robs us of young people that we find in Springbok because they've got nothing to do, so they end up in this little town called Springbok and become homeless on the streets. So we can change that. If we went, all of us, to iLima, the thing that my mother used to put me through school so that I can stand, in front of you today. And we are already doing it. When I leave this room on Monday, I go to Namakwaland. We've got 40 animals that we're putting through the right process so that individuals can actually get a lamb and their money, they know who benefited from it and they know what that money is going to be used for. So my message, is that what if all of us got together as a collective and we shared the resources so that we can benefit people who are outside, of the mainstream economy, and you can be part of that. Thank you very much.